Today's episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is sponsored by Web Healer. You're a counsellor in private practice and you need a website, or you've got an existing website which you need help with. Web Healer are offering Counselling Tutor Podcast listeners, that's you, £100 off the cost of a website design and build. Now, Web Healers specialise in websites for counsellors and psychotherapists. It's what they do. And the Web Healer team provide a completely non-technical, done-for-you solution, leaving you to focus your time on your clients. Operating for 20 years, Web Healer are a trusted resource amongst counsellors when it comes to getting your practice online. So get the package details and claim your £100 off coupon for your new website by going to counsellingtutor.com/website. That's counsellingtutor.com/website.
Hi, I'm Rory, and welcome to episode 304 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. I'm delighted to catch up with Cathy Sansom, soon to be Dr. Cathy Sansom, who has an advanced diploma in humanistic counselling, an executive master's in business administration from the London Business School, and she's about to complete a doctorate in psychotherapy at the Maternity Institute. Today, Cathy will be discussing a recent lecture she delivered for the Counselling Tutor CPD Library on the psychotherapeutic needs of mothers returning to work after maternity leave. So with that said, let's get on with today's episode.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for counsellors, psychotherapists, and counselling students. Here are your hosts, Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly.
A very warm welcome from Rory and myself, Ken, to episode 304 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. We are delighted to have you here. Thank you for lending your ears. And we start today with our ethical, sustainable practice, where today we're going to be speaking about what to look for in an autism-informed supervisor. If you're working with a neurodivergent client group, what do you need to look for within your supervision? Then in Practice Matters, we dive into an interview with Cathy Sansom. And Rory, you were speaking to Cathy about mothers returning to work after maternity leave, as you beautifully introduced at the head of today's podcast, Rory. And then we dive into student services, where we recognize you, the students, on your journey. And if you're listening to this in real time, you're probably very close to a break, and we're going to be speaking about taking a course during that summer break, sunshine and learning, putting those two together. But let's kick off today with our ethical, sustainable practice, with what to look for in a autism-informed supervisor. And I guess, Rory, we hear more and more about the importance of understanding and recognizing neurodivergence. It seems like in the last 3 to 5 years, it's really piqued a lot of interest, a lot more recognition, a lot more research coming out. So it's likely that we may be seeing clients that present with neurodiversity. And of course, we want to be taking this to supervision and best serving our clients. What should we look for in a autism-informed supervisor, Rory?
Really interesting. And I picked up in the intro, you said that in the last 5 years, we'll be seeing more and more neurodivergent clients. We've always seen neurodivergent clients. It's just that we've never known, and maybe they've never known. And if I look back over my practice history, I can think of a handful of clients that, had I known what I know now, and hindsight is a wonderful thing, I would have probably been able to serve them better. And the reason that we need an autism or neurodivergent informed supervisor is because the people who were previously hidden, that we didn't know about autism or neurodiversity, are now emerging. It's becoming something that's talked about in professional services and in professional discussions. And we're going to see more neurodivergent people in our therapy rooms. And if we do, we need the support of our supervisor to be able to offer them the best possible service. And a lot of supervisors now are training up in understanding neurodivergence and working with the needs of neurodivergent people. So I think the first thing to think about is if you're working with someone who's clearly neurodivergent or declares themselves as autistic, the question I think needs to be asked: can your supervisor support you? Does your supervisor understand the needs of neurodivergent clients, and do they have any training? Do they have any background working with that particular client group? Because we could only get the best supervision, the most competent supervision, I think, by working with colleagues who have an understanding. They should be further on down the road than us. So supervisors should be further on down the path. They're more experienced. And I think asking the question about how much your supervisor knows about neurodivergence, how are they engaging in CPDs, I think is a good starting point, Ken.
I agreed. And just for clarity on this topic, we're really talking about a neurodivergent informed supervisor. We're going to be using the word autism just as an example of that as we do our discussion today. And of course, we do recognize ADHD, ADD, and the spectrum that makes up neurodivergence in its entirety. Yes, I think that appropriate training is really, really important. You might ask your supervisor outright. And I think what's also really important is, what is the commitment to ongoing CPD? Now, I know, Rory, that we in Counselling Tutor, we have been building a training course for counsellors on neurodivergence. It's still in production. It's a massive piece of work because we really want to make sure that it covers what needs to cover. And what we're recognizing is how quickly the information is changing. As new research comes available, it's changing so quickly. And I think that points to regular CPD with neurodivergence, because of it kind of blooming at the moment, or opening up and being seen and understood so much more. New information is coming to light all the time. Even the language that is used is changing, and it can change on a month-to-month basis. So it's worth noting that this is not something where you do a training course and that's that done, we can now move on. It's keeping the eye, I guess, on what that looks for. And then, of course, training is one thing, but if you're talking about supervision, experience working within the neurodivergent community is absolutely priceless. And that's something that you might ask your clinical supervisor, just saying, have you had any experience in working with this client group? Because reading about something, doing training about something, but it is very different to it having a personal impact from working and being there, I guess, in the trenches, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. Theory is one thing, but practice and working with a neurodivergent group is another thing. And I'll pick up on the change of the language. It's really interesting. The language is changing very, very quickly. So, the medical model would talk of ASD, autistic spectrum disorder. And, that word disorder is so loaded and so, to some extent, judgmental, isn't it? There's something wrong with you. You've got a disorder. And what we're coming to now is that, being neurodivergent, or indeed being autistic, is actually part of humanity. It's not a disorder. It's the fact that people are wired up. Their brain structures are wired up in a different way to maybe other people, and we would accept that. It's a bit like saying, someone's got French language disorder because they only speak French. You wouldn't dream of that, because that's just how they are. They happen to speak French, and because they don't speak English doesn't mean they're disordered. And I think if we were to frame neurodivergence in that way, we would see that it's important for the language to reflect, how we are accepting of people of difference.
Yes,
and it kind of gets under my skin a bit when people use disorders for things which are effectively just an extension of the human condition. And as therapists, and indeed as humans, we just need to adapt. If our friend or our colleague or even our clients are neurodivergent, then we should try to work hard to bridge that gap and try and work to their frame of reference where possible. So that kind of language is very fast becoming redundant, and we need to be aware of that. And it's changing very quickly, Ken. The research I've been doing for the course that I'm building it's literally the last 3 years where most of the research, certainly in working with clients and making sure that you're adapting to their needs, has really come to the fore. Anything before, I think, 2019, there's very little. There's very, very little. And in fact, there's precious little on working with clients from a Black client group. There's very little research being done. So, it's a growing edge, and it's going to change again. I think we're going to see it develop and change, and our knowledge expand with the help of our clients and with the help of people who are really interested in supporting this client group.
Yeah, and that kind of just points back to the point of this, of that regular CPD. You would expect that your supervisor may have done a certificate in working with neurodivergence, but you would expect that they would have that continuing study and interest within this topic, because it is, I guess, changing so rapidly, as you mentioned there, Rory, and terms that were used just a few years ago are now less acceptable to non-acceptable. As you've said, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, is no longer used, and there are those that would be offended by that kind of language. So it's kind of knowing where we're at, and even logos that are used or to depict neurodivergence. There are now some no logos that were used in the past that offend some people. So it's so important to keep up to date with how this changes. And then, of course, there's the other side of this, which is the legalities. There is the Equality Act, and of course there is special legislation here in the United Kingdom as well that does address neurodivergence, and you would expect that your supervisor would be abreast of the changing laws and legislation to be able to support you and guide you in your practice. And I know, Rory, when you were building this training, we needed to build it very differently to how we build our other training, because other training stays pretty static. Once you've learned the content and the presentation and how to work with it, you're okay. But with neurodivergence, because it is fluid and it is continuously moving, I know you built it, Rory, in such a way that it is modular, that if you do that training today and then you do it, you can dip back in, you get lifetime access to the training, you dip back in after a year, all of the updates will reflect there. So it's a living training where you can go back in and get the latest updates, because it is changing so much, including legalities, which changed not that long ago as well. And I know that it was pushed from the United Kingdom to get that legislation passed, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have the Equalities Act 2010, which is certainly here in the UK, which is a quite a comprehensive piece of legislation, which brought together huge amounts of previous legislation under one umbrella, if you like. But we also have the Autism Act, which was passed, and that speaks specifically to autism. And I think within the Equalities Act, because the Equalities Act is a very clever piece of legislation, because it allows the legislation to be interpreted in different ways, so people can interpret the legislation, and there isn't a specific clause in the Equality Act about neurodivergence, but it does fall under quite a few of the protected characteristics. And of course, they do talk about making reasonable adjustments under the Equalities Act, which means that, in terms of working with neurodivergent clients, you might want to dim the lights, or you might want to address any kind of loud sounds, or you might want to provide, some kind of fiddle toys, the little spinners and things, so people can feel grounded, weighted blankets. There's quite a few things that we do cover in the course, which would help support neurodivergent clients. And also it asks us to kind of think our practice, because everybody who's ever studied counselling, it's a 50-minute clock, it's this session, it's that session, and that works very reasonably, I suppose, for neurotypical people. Might not work too well with neurodivergent people. So it's a case of re-looking at our practice. And you're absolutely right, Ken. The course is built in a modular way. so that if anything changes, we can alter the information and bring it up to date, which is brilliant, because when you do a course, you tend to take your CPD certificate and wander off, and then that's the information. It's kind of like a pickled egg, in that it just that's it. That's the
Yes.
information, isn't it? It's like a pickled egg in a jar. That's the information. It's kind of held in time, and that's it. With the course I'm building, and indeed with all the courses we do, we update them and people get lifetime access. So it means that you can go back, and if you need to look at a certain aspect, you might find that there's been some more information or something's changed, which is great. It means you don't particularly have to take another course. But I can't understate the importance of doing some CPD or training and having the support of a supervisor who understands neurodivergence, because because more and more clients are presenting with it. For so long it's been hidden. It was certainly the case in my family. Myself, my daughter have both discovered in later life that we're neurodivergent, and I think we're not unusual. I think there's a lot of people who are thinking, I wonder if I am, and they go and get an assessment or a diagnosis, which of course there are a lot of people doing. That's on the rise at the moment, people getting a diagnosis, and then they're realizing that actually a lot of their issues were not mental health issues, inverted commas. It was because they were neurodivergent, and they needed just a bit of support and people to have a bit of understanding about the fact that they kind of saw the world slightly different.
Yeah, and you mentioned the importance of that, and because more and more people are having access to information, maybe seeing a television program or hearing something on the radio, or maybe reading something with a lot more information being available, and then maybe asking that question to themselves, I wonder if I might be neurodivergent. It's very possible that their first presentation in that journey might be to you as a therapist. You may have somebody sat in front of you, a client, saying, you know what, I've been wondering, and I've been reading this, and I've been looking at that, and wondering if I might be neurodivergent. It's not uncommon for a neurodivergent individual to engage in therapy pre their assessment, formal assessment if they choose that, or self-assessment if they choose that, and post the assessment as well, because it can kind of reframe their life and how they look at their life, and truths that they once held, they may be looking back on those truths and going, was it really like that, or was it because I was different to others? And I just want to point out, Rory, yesterday I went for an eye test. And part of the eye test, I needed to put my optometrist in contact with my previous optometrist, because we've moved home to North Wales now. And the very kind, helpful lady gave me access to her computer to be able to find the details of my previous optometrist, and I couldn't work it competently. And the reason I couldn't work the computer competently is because it was a Windows-based computer, and I work on Mac. Now, they do the same things. Windows-based computer, Mac computer do the same things, but they work slightly different. They have a different way of processing information. They have a different layout, and it made me clumsy, and it made me stumble, and it made me frustrated in not being able to work that. And I often think of neurodivergence as that. It's just a slightly different operating system, and when we don't fully understand it and we're not competent in it, then we might find it cumbersome and clumsy, and we might appear that way. And we want to, I guess, inform ourselves, get the supervision we need to be able to work around that. And of course, we close this topic off about additional qualities that you might want to look for in a supervisor to support you with a neurodivergent client group. And they are empathy and sensitivity, that patience, that kindness, adaptability and flexibility, and strong communication skills. And your supervisor may also be kind of nudging you into a collaborative approach, certainly in your supervision working, a collaborative approach of how you might work with the client. And of course, when we're speaking about a neurodivergent client, every single client is different. Every single neurodivergent client is different and unique. There is not a one size fits all. Okay, this client is neurodivergent, so I will work this way. They are an individual, and you will meet them where they are at, and you would hope that your supervisor would be able to hold and guide you through that process, Rory.
Absolutely. And of course, the other aspect is you may be a neurodivergent therapist, which means that you might need a supervisor who can support you and understand you and the way that you work and the way you communicate. I'm sure there's going to be some people listening to this who are neurodivergent therapists, and having a supervisor who understands that can make supervision a more collaborative and a more pleasurable experience for someone who's accepting of difference. So I think some really important areas. And I think a lot of food for thought, a lot to reflect on.
Indeed.
If you're looking for, or you need to ask your supervisor some pointed questions, I guess. Or not pointed, but collaborative questions. We don't want to be asking points. We don't want to be pointing things at people.
Pointy questions.
Some collaborative questions, or some intuitive questions. That's what I put.
3 takeaways for you as we come to the end of this topic. Takeaway number 1, we have a handout that has been created. It's one of Rory's super duper handouts. What to look for in an autism-informed supervisor. You'll be able to find that by going to counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcast tab, go to episode 304. That's 304. You can download that from within that page. Takeaway number 2, if you are a member of our Counsellor CPD library. So this is a library where we get experts in various topics to come in. They have learning outcomes and they deliver a CPD lecture, a lecture on a given topic. If you are a member of our CPD library, log in and look up autism, ADHD or neurodivergence, and you will see that we already have some really good content in there that you can make your way through. And thirdly, coming soon to Counselling Tutor is our training course in neurodivergence, in identifying, working with, and going through the process of working with a neurodivergent client that may come to you. So keep an eye open for that. How do you get onto that list? Well, the training hasn't been built yet, so we don't have a waiting list for the course at the present moment. But if you are a member of our CPD library, or even if you go and download the free handout, that will put you on our mailing list, and we will then send an email out when that training is ready, and then you can learn more about that if you so wish to. And all of that information is at counsellingtutor.com. And that is our ethical, sustainable practice for today. And then we move out of ethical, sustainable practice into the CPD section of the Counselling Tutor podcast. We have a CPD library, as mentioned, and I know that Cathy Sansom has made a lecture for that CPD library, Rory, but you met up with Cathy to speak about the needs of mothers returning to work after maternity leave.
Absolutely, and I just want to acknowledge it. By the time you hear this, it might be Dr. Cathy Sansom, because she's about to gain her doctorate. So many congratulations to Cathy on that. And an important piece of research talking about women who are coming back to the workplace after having a time for maternity leave, and the challenges that some may face. I caught up with Cathy, and this is what she had to say.
Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by the Counsellor CPD Library. To access top quality, relevant continuing professional development for your practice that you can do at a time that suits you, and all for less than the price of a cup of coffee, visit counsellingtutor.com.
There's a lot of research that's carried out in the world of psychotherapy, and I'm actually very pleased to meet up again with Cathy Sansom, who has done some research into the psychotherapeutic needs of mothers returning to work. And in our preamble, this was part of her PhD. She's about 2 weeks away from becoming a doctor, so I will say soon to be Dr. Cathy Sansom. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rory. It's great to see you again. Thanks for inviting me.
So just tell me a little bit about the work that's informed the lecture that you produced for the Counsellor CPD Library.
Yeah, so it was research I was conducting for my doctorate in psychotherapy, and that's at the Metanoia Institute of Middlesex University, by the way. And what I did was I did an early piece of research on first-time mothers returning to work. And lots of interesting output, but one really surprising part was that the keeping in touch days, which happen during a mother's maternity leave, if the company and the mother agree, up to 10 days, those days were not always as productive and helpful as you might imagine. And in fact, there was one memorable mother who had gone back, and she was a real high flyer, sailed through university, great at her job, etc. And the day was so detrimental to her, her first kit day, that she nearly gave up her career. And so that prompted me to expand the research further. So that was the impetus, Rory.
And what did your research tell you about mothers returning to work and this Keep in Touch Day?
Yeah, it was interesting because I was looking at it, obviously as a researcher, but also as a mother myself. I had 3 children, and as a manager, because I've managed people in teams for over 30 years and had mothers come back to work during that time, of course. And what I realized was that what you see as a manager is the tip of the iceberg. You see the mother coming in on that day, but actually what I learned through the research is there is a lot of build-up, a lot of anxiety, guilt, and other emotions, and there's an aftermath too, right? Going back over what you got out of the day. Do you still want to return to work? Might be a big question. So really, a lot of the work that the research has turned into help. I've actually created 10 modules, one of which will be in the lecture for psychotherapists and counsellors. But there are also, thoughts for the partner, for the manager, for HR. And it's really all the parties who can have a part to play in a mother's really successful return.
Yes, and I think sometimes this is something that's not visible in society. We know that women have, and for some years have had maternity rights. And, as one of my former female managers said to me, or to our team, woman has baby, woman, has maternity, woman returns to work. She had a very procedural view of the world, I think. And I think it wasn't, for colleagues who came back to work, it wasn't quite as straightforward as that. And obviously, and even for six, say we say it would take a 6-month period, businesses, companies, organisations could change so much. It can be quite, I'm guessing, it can be quite daunting for women to come back, even though they have rights under law. That's, I guess, what I'm getting to.
Yes, absolutely. And, what you see is that mothers come back and things have changed. Sometimes it's really big things. I had one mother in my research and hadn't been told of a complete management change, including her own manager on the day. But the small things too, if you think about it, if you're working, little things are changing all the time. But if you're away from that environment, you don't know the cumulative effect of all those changes. And nobody's keeping a log for you of those tiny changes. So it's stepping into the unknown sometimes. And the fear of, not knowing what you don't know can be quite anxiety provoking. Yeah.
Absolutely. And of course, having a child, I speak as a father myself, one step away from the process, obviously, is that it's very demanding. It's a physically demanding process on the mother. It's the emotionally demanding process on the mother. And also, I don't know what your observations of what I'm going to say will be, but I still think there's still a lot of work to be done to support, women coming back into the workplace and parenting. There's still a bit of a gap, I think, and it seems to be it could be quite a large one.
Yes, it can be. And what I learned through the Kit Day research specifically is that the impact of the manager is really important, even more than your normal day-to-day contact with the manager, because everything is really focused around them. And often there isn't the training of a manager as well. Partners can be very important as well, but on those particular days, companies could really do well to make sure their managers are aware of the emotional side as well. And relative to counsellors and psychotherapists, often there are employee assistance programs in place, and mothers take advantage of those, perhaps during maternity leave. So a really good time for some expectation setting, and that can be around even self-identity, because things have changed so much, especially for first-time mothers. There is that whole role change from being able to be, solely focused on career to now, having at least a dual role, perhaps more, caring for elderly parents as well. It can be very trying.
Yes, and I guess that's where, therapists may meet women who are in this position. And do you think that there's likely to be, did your research show there's likely to be an uptake of women accessing therapy as they come back to work? Is there any evidence of that?
Yeah, I would certainly promote it. I think it's an ideal time, because when you look at the for example, the in limbo or liminality of it, you're moving between roles. There's no real better time than to check in with a therapist, have some awareness. I don't think women who have access to the programs all take it up. Sometimes there's coaching as well for such women, but I would say it is such an important time to take up what is offered. And often women are so busy and distracted, they may not even be aware of these offerings. So again, companies can help get the message out as well.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like, companies, businesses, organisations need to be constantly vigilant of this, and to make sure that they're providing an environment that women can return to work in their new circumstances, taking into account the fact that they are in fact now mothers.
Yes, absolutely. And there's often a discussion about hours and things like that, but often those discussions happen on these very days they're in. So you can imagine going into work, having a wish to do perhaps a flexi time kind of arrangement, and everything's hanging on that day. So there's more that can be done by companies, managers, to actually use the earlier maternity leave to prepare a woman for these conversations, etc. Often companies can be unaware of how much contact a mother wants, and it is worth checking, because I certainly came across research participants who, would have found a call out of the blue quite anxiety provoking in its own right. So laying this all out in advance can be really useful.
Yes. I mean, I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it? It's about structure and planning. Yes. and planning for that that specific area of the workforce, mothers returning to work. What did you get a sense of the type of difficulties that women returning to work presented with in therapy? Did you get any sense of, was there any reoccurring themes that came up?
Yes, certainly anxiety really came through strongly, and then guilt as well. And you can understand that there's guilt at leaving the child behind. There was an interesting comment in one of the survey responses about being considered a bad mother. So it was, are you missing your baby on this keeping in touch day? If you say yes, it's, well, why have you left the baby behind and taken a day out of your maternity leave? If it's no, you're also a bad mother for, not missing your child. So there's a lot of guilt that mothers take around with them, but also just working out who they now are. What is this new self-identity? And that's very much something that therapists can help particularly with. Managers can help with some of it, but I think when it gets to the emotional side, very helpful if the mother can be working with a counsellor or psychotherapist at the time.
Yes, and I'm thinking that being a parent is a job in itself. It's another job because you've got roles, responsibilities. You've got a little human being to look after that's completely dependent on you, and some would argue that kind of never ends for those of us who are older parents, and it is an extra demand. And in my observation, I've lots of female friends who've had children. This is something that you don't know until it's happened to you. A lot of my female friends would have said, I've spoken to other female friends who've had babies, and but I think I'll be okay. But until it happens, I can't speak for women, obviously. But from what my female friends tell me, that it's not something that's maybe easily planned for, because until it's happened, you don't know what you don't know.
Yes, that's very true. And I think it's one of the reasons why companies often have quite a hands-off approach, because they were, genuinely, they're motivated to give flexibility to the mother and not bother her too much until she is a bit more certain. But there comes a point where, to your earlier point about structure and certainty, there comes a point where actually now she is quite aware of what she needs, and there needs to be that outlet and then make it happen. So yeah, you're right, flexibility, but structure is an interesting balance.
Indeed. In terms of the therapist's perspective, what do you think that therapists have to be aware of, or it might be helpful for them to be aware of when working and counselling mothers returning from maternity?
Yeah, and there's a lot of research, not just my own, out there about what research can help with on this. So the things like social media and its distortion on expectations, and even if a mother, knows to sort of see through some of the asymmetry you see on social media of everybody's handling motherhood really well. Even if she knows that, it is really difficult for her to actually put that aside. So social norms like that have been quite influenced recently by the social media expansion. And then there are things like her own expectations of herself. And especially for first-time mothers, they've never done it before. They've never done the juggling of the jobs, as you mentioned, a motherhood job as well as being a partner, perhaps, or, involved with, say, elderly parents. You can carry many roles at once. So I think it's worth understanding what she has in her life and how she perceives it. And just before these kit days, half of first-time mothers had really mixed emotions. So they were going back with positive feelings. I'm really happy and I'm going to re-find myself, etc. But at the same time, quite panicky, apprehensive. They might feel like they're an outsider, for example. So I think a really important takeaway is that many mothers are carrying both the positive and negative at the same time. Yes.
I wonder what you hope that those who watch your lecture may take away from it.
Yeah, I think for therapists, obviously, these are human emotions you'll be dealing with anyway. But I think what it will give you is a structure of the parameters and the elements that are important to a mother. So it will help you focus and perhaps ask some questions that may not come out naturally as well, because they may not be in the mother's awareness either. So I think it will use my research and that of others to give a pathway. Obviously, you deviate from it by your own skills, etc. But I think it gives a course structure that may be of use.
Well, Catherine's lecture supporting returners from maternity leave psychotherapeutically is now available to watch in our CPD library. So, soon to be Dr. Sansom, thank you so much for joining us today.
Massive thank you to Cathy, massive thank you to you, Rory, for reaching out and holding those all-important discussions. That was Practice Matters. We now head into student services, where if you're listening to this in real time and you are a student, you may be either in or very close to your summer break. Student Services is sponsored by Counselling Skills Academy. Have you ever wondered if you're using counselling skills effectively? Confidentiality means we rarely see skills used by others, so it's no wonder that so many students say they lack confidence in their counselling skills. That's why I built Counselling Skills Academy. Counselling Skills Academy is an online course that you can do at your own pace. It will give you the skills competence and confidence to know that you're using your skills most effectively. You will see real counselling skills used by a counsellor in real life sessions, covering everything from how risk is assessed right through to working towards an appropriate ending. Visit counselingskillsacademy.com to learn more and to claim your counselling tutor discount. That's counselingskillsacademy.com. To keep on topic, we're going to be speaking today about taking a course during the summer break, Rory, if you are a student.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I remember when we talked, Ken, as we broke up for summer, we get students come and say, I'll see you in September, and we'd say, great. And they say, what can I do, in that gap, in that sort of like 2-3 month gap, 2 month gap. And, he said, well, you could do some reading, you could do some CPD. And some people choose to take a course. There's lots of courses that run online, some face-to-face. And, you could do a course. I mean, some useful courses to look at are things like suicide awareness courses, certainly for those who are moving into level 4, into the practice time. You could look at that. Some people have actually, I've known, have done like CPD workshops. They've gone away and they've done a quite an intense CPD weekend. I've had one who went to a silent retreat for a weekend, and just to decompress and just to reflect. And I think there's real good value in that. And there are some of the students really wanted to keep the momentum going. Their fear was that, you drop off the edge of a cliff after you leave for summer. There's no classes. There's nothing to do apart from maybe reading a book or watching a film. So they really wanted to keep the momentum going. So that's 2 suggestions. Suicide awareness, which someone's always running a suicide awareness course, and then some people, as I say, go away on retreats just to take in the personal developments and to kind of reflect on that kind of change that process of change that might be evolving within them.
Yes. Yeah. Good call there, Rory. And I guess, I was speaking to my daughter yesterday, and she's about to go on her break soon from university. And we worked it out. And she's going to be on break for around about 4 months before she's back engaged again. And she's looking at this and going, what am I going to do in this time? Am I going to forget everything that I've learned? So it is. I certainly get it from a first-hand experience here. And you mentioned something like suicide awareness, and I just want to put out there, if you are a student and you are a member of the Counselling Tutor CSR, it's called, Counselling Study Research Source. It's a library for students. We've got a CPD section in there, and there's a great lecture on suicide awareness if you wanted to go and kind of do an hour's CPD on that and get yourself a certificate. We have a number of other CPD lectures in there as well. But I did want to say, one of the things to watch out for if you are thinking of doing a course during your break. So we've looked at what are the pros of that. There are perhaps some cons just to consider. And what you don't want to be doing is contaminating the modality of your learning. So I'm going to give you an example. If you've just finished year 2 of maybe 4 years of study, and you're studying a modality, and I'm going to take one out at random, and I'm going to say person-centered, what you might want to steer away from is going and doing a course on an introduction to transaction analysis, or a course of an introduction to CBT. And it may be that you might have a want to maybe practice in that modality when you graduate one day, and that's fine. But putting it in between your studies can muddle you up when you come to the theory that you're going to be putting in for your assignment. So that's just a small consideration. But there are many complementary courses or activities that you can take part in. One of them you've already said, Rory, personal care or self-care, self-development, maybe a retreat, maybe a meditation course, maybe a mindfulness course or something like that. Absolutely fantastic, where you're working on you, but it works on you in such a way that it recharges your battery to be able to be there, I guess, for others when called to do so. And then, of course, this section, Student Services, is sponsored by Counselling Skills Academy, which is my own little personal project that I built because I'm really passionate about counselling skills. And counselling skills tend to be very similar across modalities. Yes, there will be slight variations, but the use of silence is the use of silence. Paraphrasing is paraphrasing. Working with metaphor is working with metaphor. They remain the same no matter what the modality is. And Counselling Skills Academy has a little training course there, which is there 100% to kind of hone your counselling skills, to give you the competence and confidence. And there's a little community where peers meet up and they work to a little blueprint that is taught in Counselling Skills Academy to kind of go through their skills together and give constructive feedback, constructive and kind feedback that improves those skills. So that might be another consideration. But there's a lot to consider during the break, Rory, perhaps even getting the reading materials for the upcoming modules that you'll be doing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously people have a lot of other things to fit in holidays, like going away with the families and doing other things but studying. But yeah, if you want to continue the cadence, if you like, or the pace of your studies, there's lots of things you can do. And I'm reminded in the CSR library we've got some excellent lectures on working with self-harm.
Yep.
Working with neurodiversity. There's quite a few really good lectures that can build up, if you like, a pre-practice awareness. If you're moving from certificate to diploma, where you're going to be working with clients, there's there's a lot of information in the CSR library that would kind of prepare you for working in a placement and meeting clients and being able to support them. But yeah, it was a growing number of students at the end of our time teaching together, Ken, who would ask at the end of the year. And in fact, I think if my mind serves me correctly, the college are even thinking of putting on courses through the summer to sort of plug that gap. So yeah, maybe you're one of those people who want to do something in between sessions. So if you do, why not share that in our Facebook group? If you go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor, why don't you pop in and start a thread about what things you're going to be doing in the break, what training or what interests you're going to be doing or exploring in the break, and share it with other people, because I think that would be a brilliant service.
Indeed, yes. And this has been episode 304 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. We're so grateful that you joined us.
Yes, we started with ethical, sustainable practice, what to look for in an autism-informed supervisor or a neurodivergent informed supervisor. Practice Matters is an interview with Dr. Cathy Sansom. I think by now she has a doctorate, and she's talking about the psychotherapeutic needs of mothers returning to work. And then finally, we touched on student services, keeping busy during the summer break, maybe taking a course or engaging in some form of CPD. So finally, before we go, I have a little bit of a favour to ask you. If you've enjoyed today's podcast and it's been of help to you, why not leave a review on your favourite podcast platform? You might be listening on iTunes. Why don't you leave us a review? Ken and myself love to see a review. Really does make our day. And if you know someone who would appreciate this podcast being shared with them, why not share it across your social medias so that they can hear it too? Finally, thank you so much for allowing us to be part of your practice journey. It really means a lot that you follow us and that the people who are regular listeners to the podcast get so much value from it, so they tell us. So as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode by visiting counsellingtutor.com.